Think a brutal July heat wave means the end of your container garden? Think again. If your potted plants are frying in the midsummer sun, you're just growing the wrong crops, which is exactly why today we are breaking down 15 perennial container vegetables that tolerate drought during intense July summer heat waves. Forget replanting fragile annuals every spring. We're talking about permanent biological fortresses you plant once. From asparagus crowns that hoard water in subterranean silos to massive globe artichokes that literally reflect UV radiation, these are rugged survivors that thrive even when the potting soil turns to dust. Make sure to stick around until the end of the countdown, because I'm going to reveal a 2,000-year-old underground watering secret that makes any container completely drought-proof. But right now, let's get straight into number 15.
Number 15. Asparagus. While most casual gardeners picture vast, sprawling commercial fields when they think of asparagus, this incredible perennial is actually a magnificent, long-term investment for a patio container. Rather than replanting fragile annuals every single spring, a properly established asparagus crown can live for a decade or more in a confined space. Once allowed to fully establish without being harvested for its first 2 years, it consistently provides an abundant harvest of crisp, sweet, nutrient-dense spears early in the season, and then transforms into a resilient, drought-proof fortress by midsummer. Depending on your local USDA hardiness zone, this plant genuinely thrives from Zone 3 down to Zone 8. It requires a sustained period of winter dormancy, known as chill hours, to successfully trigger its aggressive spring growth, meaning that those of you gardening in the deep, sweltering heat of Zones 9 and 10, like South Florida or Southern Texas, will struggle to achieve optimal yields unless you specifically seek out heat-tolerant cultivars like UC157. Because you are housing a root system that is biologically programmed to last for many years, you strictly must select an oversized container. A heavy-duty 20 to 25-gallon resin pot or a highly breathable fabric grow bag is the crucial minimum requirement, and it must feature enormous drainage holes. Asparagus despises sitting in stagnant water, so your soil mix must be engineered for instant drainage. Create a highly porous blend consisting of 50% rich organic compost, 30% coarse builder's sand, and 20% chunky perlite, meticulously maintaining a neutral pH between 6.5 and 7.0. Skip the seeds entirely and purchase 1-year-old dormant roots known as crowns. Dig a deep, 6-inch trench directly down the center of your substantial container and spread the long, fleshy roots out like a spider gripping the soil. Slowly backfill in the dirt as the green shoots emerge over the next few weeks. When the brutal, unforgiving heat waves of July finally arrive, your asparagus will have erupted into towering, feathery green ferns. The strict golden rule of summer survival is to never cut these ferns down. Simply lay a thick, 3-inch blanket of organic straw mulch over the soil surface to block solar evaporation, and provide one deep soak-in watering session per week early in the morning. The brilliant survival mechanism of this plant has been extensively studied by researchers at UC Davis. Underneath the soil, the fleshy, tentacle-like crowns act as vast, subterranean water silos. When the July sun reaches its devastating peak and the topsoil turns to dust, the delicate upper ferns initiate a mild temporary dormancy to halt transpiration, while the extensive root system easily survives by drawing purely upon its own internal hoarded water reserves. Number 14. Globe Artichoke. Standing as a striking architectural masterpiece of the Mediterranean landscape, the Globe Artichoke is a dominating presence on any patio. Featuring sprawling, heavily serrated, silvery green leaves that span several feet across, this plant is not merely a highly expensive gourmet culinary delicacy, it is a biological fortress engineered to withstand extreme solar radiation. For those of us gardening in zones 7 through 10, this perennial giant reaches its true maximum potential, making it a heritage crop for the mild, temperate climates of the West Coast, particularly in California. For anyone residing in our frigid, snowy northern regions of Zone 6 and below, the severe winter frost will quickly kill the root system, meaning you must physically drag this heavy container into a heated greenhouse or garage before the first freeze. To prevent this top-heavy giant from being forcefully blown over by strong summer thunderstorms, you must anchor it in a substantial, heavy-duty 20 to 30-gallon wooden half-barrel or a thick, high-density resin planter. The soil must be an incredibly rich, nitrogen-dense powerhouse to support the sheer volume of its expansive leaf canopy. Blend a premium potting mix with a heavy ratio of aged cow manure, pure worm castings, and a healthy dose of coco coir to retain a consistent level of baseline moisture. You should always propagate artichokes by planting a healthy basal offshoot, or cutting, directly into the center of the container, ensuring that the crown of the root rests at or just slightly above the soil surface to reliably prevent the onset of fatal crown rot. As the suffocating heat of July settles in, the artichoke enters a natural, biological resting phase known as summer dormancy. Instead of heavily overhead watering and soaking the broad leaves, which invites deadly fungal pathogens in the humid air, you must practice deep, slow bottom watering directly at the base of the trunk. Do not panic if the large lower basal leaves begin to turn yellow and die off. Simply use sharp pruners to cleanly remove them, forcing the plant to conserve its water and redirect all of its energy strictly to the younger inner core. The Journal of Agricultural Water Management details the stunning evolutionary defense mechanism of this plant. The leaves are completely coated in a thick, waxy, silvery gray cuticle layer. This unique color and texture acts as a highly effective biological mirror, actively reflecting intense ultraviolet radiation back into the atmosphere and keeping the internal core temperature of the leaves drastically cooler than the surrounding ambient air. Number 13. Sunchokes. Often referred to as the Jerusalem artichoke, this towering native prairie perennial is a biological powerhouse that produces remarkable yields of crisp, nutty, potato-like tubers. Standing as a colossal sunflower-like giant, it provides a dense canopy of green foliage before retreating underground. It is one of the most resilient, geographically versatile root vegetables you can possibly cultivate, proving to be incredibly cold-hardy and vigorous from Zone 3 all the way down to Zone 9. It will effortlessly survive being buried under several feet of Midwestern snow, only to emerge with rapid, towering growth as soon as the spring soil thaws. Because you are cultivating a fast-spreading root vegetable, you must provide a deeply accommodating container. A heavy-duty 15 to 20-gallon plastic half-barrel or a large fabric grow bag is mandatory to properly contain its rhizomatic runners. This plant is notoriously forgiving and actively thrives in poor environments. But to maximize your tuber harvest, blend standard potting soil with a healthy ratio of coarse builder's sand and loose compost to ensure the roots can physically expand without encountering compacted clay. You propagate sunchokes by simply burying a few healthy tubers exactly 4 inches deep into the soil during the early spring, and they will rapidly multiply, entirely filling the substantial container by the end of the summer. When the intense heat waves of July arrive and the thermometer approaches the 100-degree mark, sunchokes display remarkable resilience, though container-grown plants cannot be completely ignored. While they are practically invincible in the ground, a container dries out rapidly. You should provide a deep soaking every week or so, rather than abandoning them entirely. Do not panic if the tall upper stalks begin to look slightly scorched or droop in the afternoon sun. This temporary wilting is a natural survival mechanism to reduce surface area and limit transpiration. Research highlights that the true power of this plant lies entirely beneath the soil. The subterranean tubers act as highly advanced biological vaults, hoarding immense quantities of water and a complex carbohydrate called inulin. When the topsoil is baked dry by the July sun, the plant actively pulls hydration straight from these underground storage tanks, ensuring the root system remains completely insulated, hydrated, and protected until the autumn harvest. Number 12. Wild chicory. Possessing the highly resilient genetics of a wild foraging plant, chicory is a towering perennial that produces some of the most breathtaking, brilliant azure blue flowers in the botanical kingdom. While the tender young leaves are prized for adding a sharp, bitter crunch to high-end salads, the deep taproot is famously harvested, roasted, and ground into one of the world's most historically significant coffee substitutes. It is a highly adaptable survivor, perfectly suited to thrive in almost any climate profile, establishing a permanent presence anywhere from frigid mountainous regions down to baking, arid desert borders, adapting flawlessly across zones 3 through 10. Because the true power of this plant lies in its long subterranean taproot, you must provide a deeply accommodating container. A heavy, unglazed terracotta pot with a minimum depth of 12 to 15 inches is mandatory. The porous nature of the terracotta allows the soil to breathe, actively preventing the root from overheating during a blistering July afternoon. Chicory does not require rich, pampered garden soil and actually thrives in leaner conditions. To replicate its natural environment, blend standard potting mix with a heavy ratio of crushed gravel, coarse sand, and a light dusting of agricultural lime to create the highly alkaline, fast-draining environment it genetically favors. Simply broadcast the seeds across the surface of the container and press them in firmly. They require direct, unbroken light to trigger germination. As the seedlings emerge, carefully thin the pot until only the single, most dominant plant remains, allowing it to monopolize the space and develop a substantial root. During the peak heat of July, wild chicory requires minimal human intervention. It is fully capable of enduring severely dry potting soil for extended periods without showing significant signs of distress. You generally only need to provide one deep watering session when you physically see the edges of the leaves beginning to fold inward. A fascinating study published in the Journal of Plant Physiology reveals the molecular secret behind this drought tolerance. As the taproot drives downward to the bottom of the container seeking moisture, it synthesizes and stores high concentrations of a complex carbohydrate called inulin. This inulin does not just serve as stored energy. It chemically alters the intracellular osmotic pressure within the root system, physically reinforcing the cell membranes and preventing them from collapsing or rupturing when the surrounding soil dries out. Number 11. Okinawa Spinach. Hailing from the humid, tropical regions of East Asia, Okinawa spinach is a visually mesmerizing superfood that boasts a striking, two-toned aesthetic. The top of every crisp leaf is a dark, glossy emerald green, while the underside blazes with a vibrant purple. It effortlessly handles intense tropical heat, providing a continuous year-round harvest of tender greens. Because of its tropical genetics, it is an excellent long-term perennial strictly for those gardening in the warm, frost-free climates of zones 9 through 11, such as Florida, Hawaii, and Southern California. If you live in a region that experiences winter frost, you must cultivate this plant in a container that can easily be relocated indoors to a sunny kitchen windowsill before the temperatures drop. Its natural tendency to sprawl, trail, and cascade over edges makes Okinawa spinach an ideal candidate for large hanging baskets or elevated decorative pots placed high on a patio shelf. The root system is susceptible to rot if waterlogged, so your potting mix must be exceptionally loose, airy, and well-draining, while still holding enough baseline moisture to replicate a tropical jungle floor. A precise blend of 40% premium cocoa coir, 40% rich compost, and 20% perlite for drainage creates the optimal environment. You will rarely grow this plant from seed. Instead, simply take a 6-inch cut-in from an established mother plant, strip the bottom leaves, and plunge the naked stem directly into the moist potting soil. It will swiftly take root and begin pushing out new, vibrant purple foliage in just a matter of weeks. While it is a master of heat tolerance, the harsh ultraviolet rays of a mid-July afternoon sun can physically scorch and burn the delicate edges of the youngest leaves. The best summer care strategy is simply relocating your hanging basket to a position that receives dappled, filtered afternoon shade and maintaining a consistent, mild soil humidity. The University of Hawaii has highlighted the brilliant botanical defense mechanism of this plant. The blazing purple color on the underside of the leaves is the result of a high concentration of anthocyanins. While these compounds act as powerful, disease-fighting antioxidants for human beings, for the plant itself, they function as an advanced internal chemical sunscreen. This purple pigment actively intercepts and scatters excess light radiation that penetrates the top layer of the leaf, drastically cooling the cellular structure and reducing the rate of water evaporation during the hottest hours of the day.
Before we hit the top 10, what is the weirdest crop you have ever grown? Let me know in the comments. If you are finding this video engaging, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's move on to number 10.
Number 10. Tree Collards. Unlike traditional low-growing collard greens that hug the soil surface and succumb to the summer heat, this ancient wild variant grows vigorously upward, transforming into a towering structural vegetable tree. Capable of living for up to 20 years, it provides an inexhaustible year-round supply of thick, calcium-dense leaves. It shines as a standout in temperate, mild climates, firmly establishing a permanent presence in zones 7 through 10. If protected from severe, prolonged freezes, this impressive brassica will remain vibrantly green and highly productive for many years without ever dropping all its leaves, creating a stunning vertical focal point on any patio. Because a mature tree collard can easily reach a staggering height of 10 feet, you must anchor it in a substantial, heavy-duty 20-gallon or larger resin or wooden tub. To prevent summer thunderstorms from catching the broadleaf canopy and tipping the top-heavy pot over, select a naturally heavy planter, or place large landscaping stones firmly on the soil surface as a counterweight rather than at the bottom, which would ruin drainage. The soil must be structurally dense and incredibly rich. Blend a quality potting soil with a generous amount of dehydrated cow manure and rich compost to sustain the heavy nutrient demands of a growing trunk. Because true tree collards rarely produce viable seeds, you must propagate them entirely through woody cuttings. When you plant the cutting, immediately drive a thick, durable bamboo stake deep into the pot, securely tying the young stem to the pole to enforce a perfectly straight vertical growth habit. During the peak dog days of July, ensure the plant remains securely tied to its structural support. Instead of providing frequent, shallow sprinkles of water that merely wet the surface, deliver one thorough, deep soaking directly to the root zone once a week. You should also strategically harvest and strip away the oldest, lowest leaves on the trunk, which provides you with food while significantly reducing the sheer volume of foliage the roots have to hydrate. Botanical analysis of this plant explains its impressive drought resistance. Unlike fragile, herbaceous summer vegetables that rapidly lose moisture through their soft stems, tree collards undergo a process known as lignification. The plant actively converts its main green stem into thick, rugged wood. This dense bark restricts the internal vascular xylem tubes, creating a physical barrier that drastically reduces water evaporation even when battered by hot, dry, desiccant summer winds. Number 9. Nopales. Stepping into the realm of extreme survival, Nopales, the edible pads of the prickly pear cactus, are among the ultimate champions of drought-proof perennial vegetables. Widely celebrated in Latin American cuisine, these thick, fleshy green pads are harvested young, diced, and sautéed to provide a crisp, vibrant, highly nutritious vegetable crop that tastes similar to green beans with a hint of tart lemon. Perfectly adapted to thrive in the most punishing environments on Earth, this plant serves as a lifelong perennial for those gardening in the sweltering, arid heat of zones 8 through 11. If you reside in a colder northern climate, you can easily cultivate it in a heavy pot and simply roll it into a sunny garage or indoor room to sleep through the freezing winter months. To properly house this top-heavy desert plant, you must use a substantial, unglazed terracotta or thick concrete planter, ensuring the sheer physical weight of the pot counterbalances the considerable height and weight of the cactus pads. The soil composition is critical. Nopales will quickly rot if forced to sit in wet, soggy potting soil. You must thoroughly blend 30% standard potting mix with roughly 70% heavy pumice, crushed volcanic rock, and coarse gravel to create a highly porous environment that drains water in seconds. To plant, simply take a single, healthy, green pad, let the cut end dry and callus over in the open air for a full week, and then bury it about a third of the way into the dry soil. It will rapidly shoot out a thick network of roots and begin stacking new vegetable pads. During a severe July heat wave, your best course of action is intentional neglect. You can safely withhold watering for weeks at a time. The blistering heat and bone-dry soil closely mimic the exact environmental conditions this plant naturally favors. The Journal of Arid Environments explains the remarkable biological adaptation behind this vegetable. Nopales utilize a highly advanced mechanism called CAM photosynthesis. Unlike broad-leaved vegetables that open their pores during the day and rapidly lose moisture, this plant tightly locks its stomata shut under the blazing sun, only opening them in the pitch black of night to breathe. Furthermore, the internal flesh of the pad is packed with a thick, viscous mucilage that chemically binds to water molecules, acting as an internal hydrogel that drastically reduces evaporation. Number 8. Egyptian walking onions. Operating as one of the most visually fascinating and biologically resilient plants in the garden, the Egyptian walking onion is a highly self-sufficient perennial that automates its own propagation. It thrives under the blistering summer sun with minimal human intervention, providing crisp green scallion tubes and intensely flavored, bite-sized pickling bulbs year after year. It is an exceptionally hardy crop, establishing a permanent presence across the vast majority of our growing zones, performing flawlessly from the sub-zero blizzards of Zone 3 all the way to the sweltering extended summers of Zone 9, easily handling both extremes of the climate spectrum. Because this plant actively seeks to physically move and spread horizontally across its environment, housing it in a long rectangular window box is vastly superior to a standard round pot, giving it the physical runway it needs to travel. It is the ultimate survivor, largely unfazed by poor soil conditions. Whether you plant it in rich, loamy compost or highly degraded, nutrient-barren dirt cut with gravel, the Egyptian wok and onion will swiftly take root and command the space. You do not plant this onion using fragile seeds. Instead, you take the hard, mature bulbils that grow at the top of the mother plant, press the root end slightly into the dirt with the pointed tip facing the sky, and watch them push out new green growth in a matter of days. When the intense heat of July arrives, your best course of action is to largely leave them alone. Do not apply liquid fertilizers and avoid overwatering. The midsummer sun is the exact environmental trigger the plant requires to bake and harden the clusters of top-setting bulbs, infusing them with intense flavor and stored energy. The biological architecture of this plant is a masterclass in drought evasion. The hollow, perfectly cylindrical shape of the green leaves naturally minimizes the surface area exposed to harsh ultraviolet radiation. Furthermore, rather than fighting the extreme drought, the plant shifts its strategy. The main stalk transfers its remaining moisture and energy upward into the heavy clusters of top bulbs to ensure their survival. As the stalk dries out and the top clusters become too heavy to support, it naturally bends and lowers them to the dirt. The moment the bulbils touch the soil, they quickly shoot out roots, literally walking across your patio year after year. Number 7. Sea Kale. Originating from the rugged, salt-sprayed gravel beaches of northern Europe, Sog kale is a master of drought survival. Featuring large, undulating, heavily ruffled leaves that glow with a stunning blue-purple hue, it is an architectural centerpiece that produces highly prized spring shoots tasting like a flawless, nutty hybrid of asparagus and hazelnuts. Because its genetic origins lie in harsh coastal regions, it is optimally suited for cool, temperate climates spanning zones 4 through 9. It easily withstands severe winter frosts up north, and in fact, those freezing temperatures chemically convert the starches in the roots, making the subsequent spring harvest dramatically sweeter and more robust. To properly anchor this substantial plant and accommodate its thick, fleshy taproot, you must provide a deep container ranging from 10 to 15 gallons. The soil preparation is highly specific. You must actively recreate a lean, alkaline beach environment. Blend a standard organic potting mix with 30% coarse, heavy sand, and thoroughly amend the entire container with crushed oyster shells or pulverized eggshells to naturally elevate the calcium levels and spike the soil's pH. You propagate this plant by planting thongs, thick 2-inch root cuttings taken from a mature plant. Bury these root segments perfectly vertical, exactly 2 inches beneath the sandy surface in the late fall, and simply wait for the vigorous purple crown to break the surface in the early spring. During the sweltering heat of July, sea kale thrives in the windiest, most exposed locations on your patio. You should never place a plastic humidity dome or a restrictive shade cloth over this plant. It evolved to handle relentless coastal winds, and excellent airflow is required to prevent fungal issues. You must also restrict your watering schedule to a minimum. Botanical studies highlight the remarkable adaptation of this plant. Because sea kale is a halophyte, a plant specifically evolved to thrive in highly saline environments, it is capable of generating incredibly high internal osmotic pressure within its root cells. This cellular pressure is so strong that the roots can effectively draw in the final, microscopic molecules of water locked deep within dry, heavily salted soil, an environment where standard vegetables would instantly have the water pulled out of their roots, killing them in hours. Number 6. Chaya. Hailing from the dense, sweltering tropical jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Chaya is a fast-growing superfood shrub that effortlessly survives droughts, storms, and neglect, providing an abundant yield of highly digestible protein hidden within its large, maple-like leaves. Because of its strictly tropical genetics, it can only be grown outdoors year-round as a permanent perennial in the warmest, frost-free regions, specifically zones 9 through 11, like South Texas and southern Florida. If you attempt to grow this substantial plant in colder, temperate zones, you must severely prune the woody trunk down in the late autumn and physically drag the heavy container indoors to protect it from fatal winter frost. Because it rapidly grows into a large, heavy bush, you must utilize a significantly sized container, such as a repurposed 20-gallon plastic drum, ensuring you drill oversized drainage holes in the bottom to prevent root rot. The soil must mimic a harsh, arid environment. Blend a standard potting soil with a 50% mix of coarse perlite, sharp sand, and heavy gravel, creating a highly porous, fast-draining texture identical to a commercial cactus mix. You must propagate Chaya using thick, woody stem cuttings. Crucially, after taking a cutting, you must leave it sitting out on a dry table in the open air for several days to allow the raw wound to callus over. If you place a fresh, wet cutting directly into the dirt, it will quickly succumb to bacterial rot and die. When July unleashes its most punishing heat waves, place the container in full, unfiltered sunlight. This plant thrives in intense heat and performs poorly in shade. The most important rule of cultivating Chaya is culinary. Critical warning: you should always wear gloves when harvesting, as the raw sap and some varieties contain microscopic sting and hairs, and you must vigorously boil the leaves for a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes in a non-aluminum pot before consuming. This boiling process neutralizes the naturally occurring hydrocyanic acid, leaving behind a delicious spinach-like green that boasts 3 times the calcium, iron, and protein of regular spinach. The Journal of Economic Botany details its incredible survival mechanic. The thick, woody trunk is actually semi-succulent. During periods of heavy rain, the trunk expands, hoarding water deep inside its spongy internal core. When a severe summer drought strikes, the plant relies on this stored moisture, calmly pulling hydration directly from its own swollen trunk to keep its broadleaf canopy vibrantly alive.
Which vegetable from the list impressed you the most? Do you have any of them in your garden yet? Let me know down below. If you are enjoying this countdown, hit like and subscribe to the channel before we break into the top 5.
Number 5. Sweet potato greens. While most traditional gardeners grow this sprawling, vigorous vine strictly for the substantial root harvest at the end of the season, advanced cultivators utilize it as a permanent, high-yield, leafy vegetable. The vibrant, heart-shaped leaves are incredibly tender, highly nutritious, and lack the bitterness found in traditional summer greens, making them an ideal substitute for spinach when the heat destroys your garden. Functioning as a heat-loving perennial in the frost-free climates of zones 9 through 11, it will provide a lush, cascading canopy of edible foliage year-round. For colder climates, it serves as a resilient summer crop that can easily be brought indoors as an edible houseplant before the autumn frost. Because this vigorous vine tends to naturally trail and cascade over the edges of its environment, it is an excellent candidate for oversized hanging baskets or a deep 10-gallon container elevated on a sturdy patio pedestal. The root system requires a loose, highly aerated environment to expand, so you must blend a premium, rich potting soil with a generous ratio of perlite and aged compost to ensure optimal drainage while providing the heavy nitrogen required for vigorous foliage production. You will rarely grow this plant from seeds. Instead, you simply take a vegetative cutting from a mature vine, place the naked stem directly into a glass of water until white roots emerge from the nodes, and transplant it into the warm soil, where it will rapidly establish itself in a matter of weeks. When the intense heat of July arrives, this plant shifts into its peak growth phase. While other leafy greens instantly wilt and bolt into bitter flowers under the blistering sun, sweet potato greens actively use the intense solar radiation to rapidly multiply their canopy. If you accidentally neglect the container and the soil turns to dust, the plant relies on a brilliant, hidden survival mechanism. Deep beneath the soil, it develops thick, swollen storage tubers that act as subterranean water reservoirs. If the topsoil lacks moisture, the plant draws upon the stored water and carbohydrates within these tubers. While it may intentionally let older leaves wilt and drop to reduce transpiration, this internal hydration ensures the main vine and growing tips remain alive through severe dry spells, allowing the plant to quickly bounce back with fresh green growth the moment you resume watering. Number 4. Ice Plant. Undoubtedly one of the most visually stunning and unique edible succulents on the planet, the ice plant looks exactly as though it has been thickly coated with a layer of sparkling frost, even while sitting under the blinding sun of a July afternoon. While technically a short-lived perennial or annual in the wild in a container garden, it easily acts as a permanent fixture. It readily self-seeds and can be maintained continuously. It is a highly popular choice for warm, arid climates in zones 9 through 11. If you live in a colder, temperate region of zone 8 or below, you can comfortably cultivate this plant in a smaller, decorative container and simply move it onto a sunny, south-facing kitchen windowsill to survive the freezing winter months as a beautiful, edible houseplant. Because the ice plant naturally tends to creep, crawl, and cascade horizontally over the edges of its environment, it is an ideal candidate for a wide, shallow terracotta bowl planter. The soil mixture must be exceptionally fast-draining, perfectly replicate in a coastal desert environment. Blend roughly 70% coarse sand, crushed gravel, and pumice with just 30% standard potting mix, and strictly avoid chemical fertilizers as excess nitrogen will cause the plant to grow weak and leggy. To plant, simply take a pinch of the microscopic, dust-like seeds and scatter them evenly across the surface of the damp sand without burying them. The plant will germinate rapidly, developing its iconic, thick, succulent structure shortly after breaking the surface. To encourage this plant to reach its highest culinary potential during a July heat wave, you should place the container in a highly exposed, sun-baked corner of your patio, allowing the soil to physically dry out. This specific combination of heat and dehydration is the exact physical stressor that forces the plant to produce vastly larger, thicker, and crunchier ice crystals on its leaves. Biological research highlights the remarkable adaptation behind this. The glittering ice on the leaves is actually composed of specialized epidermal bladder cells designed to hoard water and salt. Even more incredibly, when hit by severe drought and heat shock, the plant actively alters its genetic expression, switching from standard C3 photosynthesis to CAM photosynthesis, the exact same mechanism used by desert cacti. It tightly locks its stomata shut during the blazing day to halt water loss and only opens them in the cool, dark night to breathe. Number 3. Jewels of Opar. A breathtakingly beautiful, highly ornamental succulent, the Jewels of Opar features a dense canopy of thick, glossy, emerald green leaves that look as if they have been polished. As summer peaks, it shoots up delicate, wire-like stems adorned with tiny pink flowers that quickly transition into stunning, ruby-red seed pods that sparkle like precious gems. Both the crisp, mucilaginous leaves and the thick, ginseng-like taproots are highly nutritious and fully edible. It thrives as a reliable perennial in zones 8 through 11. If you live on the colder edge of this range, The underground tuber can easily survive a freezing winter if the surface of the pot is heavily mulched with thick straw, but it will perish if the soil experiences deep permanent freezing. You do not need an exceptionally large container for this plant. A standard, deep, 8 to 10-inch pot provides the perfect amount of vertical space for the fleshy root tuber to naturally swell and expand underground. The soil must drain rapidly to prevent the tuber from rotting. Purchase a premium, commercial succulent and cactus mix, and thoroughly amend it with handfuls of crushed volcanic cinder or pumice to maximize the macroporosity of the soil. To plant, simply scatter the tiny seeds directly onto the surface. Once the plant reaches full maturity, it will continuously drop its own ruby-like seeds, rapidly multiplying and completely filling the container with a dense, lush carpet of glossy foliage. When the intense heat waves of Jewel roll in, you should adopt the strict drench and dry watering protocol. Flood the container until water freely flows out of the bottom drainage holes, and then wait until the soil is completely dry throughout the pot before you water it again. Research on tropical flora highlights its dual-layered survival mechanism. Much like aloe vera, the thick leaves are filled with a dense, viscous mucilage that brilliantly locks in moisture and prevents evaporation through the epidermis. More importantly, if the drought becomes critical, the plant will intentionally drop its upper leaves to conserve energy, while the swollen tuber safely sleeps deep underground in a state of suspended animation, ready to push out fresh green shoots the moment the extreme heat breaks and water returns. Number 2. Moringa. Universally heralded as the miracle tree, Moringa is a remarkably fast-growing, highly drought-tolerant powerhouse with the rugged genetics of a desert survivor. It operates as a biological vitamin factory, providing abundant yields of nutritious leaves that contain more calcium than milk and more iron than spinach. It is biologically tailored for the sun-drenched environments of zones 9 and 10, where it will thrive under intense ultraviolet radiation. If you live in a colder northern climate, you must prune the main trunk down to a stump in late autumn and move the container into a heated space, as the plant's cellular structure will rapidly collapse and die if touched by winter frost. Because it possesses an exceptionally fast growth rate and develops a deep taproot, you must start with a substantial container. A deep, cylindrical, 15 to 20-gallon pot is the ideal minimum requirement. The soil must be heavily amended with coarse sand and crushed gravel to guarantee rapid drainage. A moringa tree is far more likely to die from sitting in soggy, waterlogged soil than from severe dehydration. When planting, push the large seed about 1 inch deep directly into its final container. Resist the urge to start moringa in a tiny plastic nursery tray. The moment you attempt to transplant it, you risk snapping the fragile taproot, which can permanently stunt the tree for the rest of its life. To manage this rapidly growing tree on a patio during a July heat wave, you should practice regular coppicing. Hard prune the upper branches with heavy loppers to control its height, which forces the trunk to push out a dense, bushy flush of tender, edible new leaves. Even when ambient temperatures exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a single deep watering once a week is usually sufficient. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, highlights its incredible survival strategy. Within its first few months of life, moringa develops a subterranean taproot that swells like a giant white radish, specifically adapted to hoard water. If a July drought becomes severe, the tree initiates a survival protocol called drought deciduousness. It severs the vascular connection to its canopy, dropping its leaves to the ground to ensure its hoarded water is strictly reserved for the main trunk. Once you finally water the pot, the trunk will flush out with vibrant green growth in a matter of days. Number 1. Babington's Leek. Earning its place at the pinnacle of this survival list is Babington's Leek, a highly resilient, wild allium originating from the wind-battered, freezing cliffsides of the Irish and British coasts. Delivering a phenomenal, complex culinary flavor that perfectly bridges the gap between sweet garlic and rich, earthy leeks, this plant does not just tolerate the intense heat of a July summer, it actively evades it. It is an incredibly cold-hardy, robust perennial that thrives flawlessly from Zone 5 all the way through Zone 9. It easily shrugs off deep, snow-packed winters, only to emerge with vigorous, towering green growth in the cool, crisp air of the early spring and late autumn. To ensure this plant has a safe, deep environment to retreat into, you must select a heavy-duty plastic or resin container that is a minimum of 10 to 12 inches deep. The soil composition is critical for long-term survival. It must perfectly balance moisture retention with extreme aeration. Create a highly loamy blend by mixing a generous amount of decomposed leaf mold, rich organic compost, and a healthy ratio of coarse builder's sand. This gritty texture prevents the soil from compacting into a block, ensuring the subterranean bulbs can easily breathe and expand. You do not plant this leek using standard black seeds. Instead, you harvest the hard, pearl-like bulbils that grow at the apex of the mother plant stem, burying them about an inch deep into the soil during the cool weeks of early autumn. When the 100-degree heat waves of July finally arrive, the best practice is to completely withhold all watering. You should let the container dry out, cleanly cut away any dead, papery leaves resting on the surface, and essentially leave the plant alone. Plant conservation studies explain the remarkable adaptation of this allium. It survives the harsh summer through a highly advanced biological mechanism called aestivation. Weeks before the deadly July heat peaks, the plant actively draws the moisture and metabolic energy out of its tall green leaves, pulling it all straight down into the armored, multi-layered underground bulb. The plant safely rests deep inside the dry dirt with a drastically slowed metabolism, completely protected from the baking sun. The moment the cool, refreshing rains of autumn arrive and soil temperatures drop, the bulb awakens, driving a thick green shoot straight up through the soil to reclaim the patio. The Botanical Pro-Tip, the ancient science of Ola irrigation. Before we wrap up, here is a master-level secret to keep your container perennials thriving in triple-digit heat. When the July sun bakes your potting soil, standard surface watering becomes highly inefficient. The water either instantly evaporates or flushes straight down the sides of dry, compacted dirt, completely bypassing the roots. The ultimate solution is a brilliant, 2,000-year-old agricultural tool known as an Ola. It is simply an unglazed, highly porous terracotta clay vessel. Instead of watering the surface, you bury this clay pot deep in the center of your container, leaving only the top neck exposed. Fill it to the brim with water and place a lid on top. Here is where the biological science takes over. Through soil moisture tension, the unglazed clay acts as a natural smart valve. When the soil is dry, the plant's roots actively wrap around the buried pot, pulling water directly through the microscopic pores of the terracotta. The exact moment the soil is perfectly hydrated, the osmotic flow automatically stops. This subsurface method completely eliminates evaporation, starves surface weeds, and forces your plants to drive their roots deep into the cooler bottom layers of the container. It provides your perennials with a personal, on-demand underground aquifer, making it the ultimate fail-proof system to beat the summer heat.
That wraps up our list of the 15 perennial container vegetables built to tolerate drought and survive those intense July heat waves. Are you going to try the underground Ola watering secret? Or which of these rugged crops are you adding to your patio first? Did I miss a drought-proof perennial that you've already had success with? Let me know in the comments below, along with what extreme gardening topics you want me to cover next. If you found this survival guide helpful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more agricultural deep dives, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay resilient and happy growing.